So an organization's wiring is the systems, the processes, the skills, the staff, the habits you have, or behaviors, and the norms in a business that determine how the business as a whole will run and how it performs. Now, some people use the term culture. I deliberately don't, because culture seems very, sort of amorphous, hard to wrap your arms around. I use the term wiring because wiring is something we can break down and explain, and it drives culture, it drives behavior, but in my opinion, most importantly, it drives bottom line business performance. Let's dig into what wiring is a bit. So why do we care about wiring? Well, a few years ago at Partners in Performance, we did some research. We took the 100 largest listed companies on the Australian Stock Exchange, and we said, when they try to improve, how much improvement opportunity do they identify? And you can see that over here. And we said, let's call that 100%. Then we looked at them and we said, okay, of what you've identified to improve, how much did you actually act on? What did you do something about versus just let it sit as an idea? Well, about half of the stuff identified, no one ever acted on. It sat as an idea, never got implemented. We said, well, that's not very good. And then we said, okay, let's go back 3 years later. Of the ideas identified, what was actually implemented, what improvement actually sustained 3 years later? You know what? Of the 100% you started with, you lost 50% in the actions, you lost another 50% in sustaining it. That's a pretty poor track record, huh? Of the ideas you have to improve, less than a quarter actually register measurable value 3 years later. You would think you would want to do something about that, wouldn't you? Next one. All right, bear with me, this one's a bit dense. So as I said, wiring is not like culture, which is a bit vague. Wiring is something you can measure. So bear with me, I'm going to walk you through. So wiring has 6 layers. So the layer at the bottom here is operating strategy. Do we know what the key performance indicators are for our business? Do we know what we're trying to achieve? If I'm a CEO, I'm probably trying to achieve EBITDA. If I'm a head of sales, I'm probably trying to achieve revenue. If I'm a head of the accounting or treasury or finance function, I've probably got a bunch of KPIs around compliance, cash management, also cost. But do I understand my operating strategy? What are my input KPIs and what are my output KPIs? Until I understand that, it's really silly to work on anything else. I need to have those set. I've got that foundation set. What do I do next? Well, then I move on to operating disciplines. Do we have the operating procedures, the controls, the equipment, the people we need to deliver our operating strategy? Once I've got that nailed down, I can then move up to the 3rd level. How do I align and motivate my people? Do we align people through role clarity, through clear performance management? Yeah. And then if I have that in place, I build it up onto sustaining disciplines. Do we close the loop by identifying variance to targets? So for example, I spent a lot of my life in chemical plants or mining operations or construction sites. And it's always interesting for me to see at the beginning of the shift, how did we do yesterday? Did we build enough floors? Did we mine enough gold? Did we produce enough chemicals? Is there ever a discussion around what was the target? What was the actual? Why did we have a gap? And what are we going to do differently to fix that today? Or on the converse, if this was the target, if this was the actual, how are we going to capture what we did so well that we can always exceed the target? This is the sustaining disciplines level and a really critical one. It's all around closing the loop. If you have these 4 levels in place well, you'll run a good business. You won't improve much, but you'll run a good business. So if you want to improve, you've got 2 more things you need to do. Continuous improvement discipline. Are you continuously improving the organization? Are you identifying improvement projects? And then the last one, visible leadership, which is not just the CEO or the ManCom, it's leadership at every level of the organization. What signals are managers sending? Are they continuously walking the talk? Are they sending consistent messages about what's important? How are we performing? What are the obstacles? So these are the 6 layers of wiring. It builds from the bottom up. There's no point working on visible leadership if you haven't got your operating strategy and your operating disciplines in place. So that's the theory, if you will. Let's look at a little bit of the reality. So over here, I've got 4 quartiles. Of the hundreds, probably thousands of clients we've worked with at Partners in Performance, we have measured all the clients we've worked with on these 6 layers of the wiring pyramid. The scores are calculated very simply from a survey, from taking agreement scores and subtracting from them disagreement scores. And that places the quartiles. So you can see across hundreds, thousands of companies, people tend to be weaker in alignment and motivation than anything else. They tend to be stronger in visible leadership, continuous improvement, and operating strategy. So when we work with clients, we place them on this and show where they are, so we can see how they stack up with other companies. So wiring is a real thing. It's got 6 levels. It can be measured. The great thing about things you can measure is you can figure out how to improve them. That's really handy.